Thank you, TJ. I am here with Savitz. As you guys know, there is a huge, sprawling double elimination tournament going on off-stream here that's impossible to keep track of single-handedly. Luckily, Savitz and myself are here to keep you up to date. So, Savitz, why don't you give us some updates?
I need to just first, really quick, like, that Amnesiac guy seems pretty good.
He seems pretty good at
Who picked him?
Hearthstone, yeah.
Oh, I picked him. But okay, to the updates. So VLPS, who is actually Raven's pick, is doing very well. He has beat 3 opponents so far. He's doing well in the upper bracket. Also in the upper bracket, Hawk Form knocked out Al Skyhigh, who was one of the top 8 players in the Winter Championship. Amas also won his match in the upper bracket, still doing well. In the lower bracket, Admirable, staying alive, just won his last match.
Nice, and I just want to talk about my picks for a quick second, because I'm a massive narcissist, but Muzzy, unfortunately, is in lower bracket. He's not doing particularly well, but still in there with a fighting chance. The Rat is still flying the flag, though. He's still alive in winners, and Chess Dude as well, one of Raven's picks, I believe. Yes, he is still in the tournament, but is in losers after losing to Best Murloc NA, who is living up to his title. So no one eliminated from the casters board just yet, unless that's changed in the last couple of minutes. We haven't signed anyone's death note to date, but we will keep you guys updated with all that moving forward. But we are very, very soon ready to get into another game. So I am sending it over to Raven to call the action.
Thanks a lot, Sol. So I'm joined for the next game by TJ and Frodan. So kind of a strange situation to be anchoring you two of all. Like, it's going to be a really cool cast. Because normally this is your guys' job, right?
Whoa.
I don't mean strange in a bad way. I mean strange in a good way.
Wow. I don't know if I should be offended or not.
It's a compliment.
Okay. All right. Well, you said it in a British accent, so it made it really smooth.
I'm not subtle.
It's not like me when I just dropped the ball like half an hour ago, and I'm like, well, I don't have a British accent to save me. And it's just like, well, all I had to do was apologize, but I wasn't even Canadian, so I was just kind of like just floating between borders a lot, Raven. But thank you.
Well, as long as you're not offended. But just before we get into this match, we are just going to have a quick overview of what's going on in the regions now and what players are left and what players are still alive.
Oh. Yeah, I can see Amaz is still very much alive from there, hailing from the U.S. West. Going to the U.S. Central, people were really pulling for guys like Dog and Chucky, who are still very much in the tournament as well.
Yeah, we can see Tides of Time is actually eliminated, so unfortunately the deck didn't work out to him. Work out too well, and of course Dakota as well, who recently won the ONOG major at PAX East. He's fallen as well.
A lot of good Canadian players still around too. Alan Dang, Neobility, players who went really far in 2015. I was actually really close to picking Neobility. You guys remember?
yeah.
And then what happened was Tides was still on the board. I was like, oh, I should probably pick Tides as my homie.
But yeah, we're nearly halfway through the day now, and we can see it's shaping up as some players are still fighting for those spots to move on to the final top 8. But the next match is actually going to be Nostam versus Korextron. So you know Korextron quite well, right?
Korextron actually beat me 4 times in a row on ladder 2 days ago. And the sad thing about it is he beat me with Hunter, and he didn't even bring Hunter to the tournament.
Blizzard, are you listening? TJ was win trading with Korextron. You let him beat you 4 times in a row? How are you going to let him do that?
He took 400 legend points from me.
Oh, no. But we do have Nostam as well. Versus, it was just funny, like over 400 legend points.
I love that Raven had a delay in that too.
Yeah.
Like 1 second.
I was just feeling TJ's pain. That's all.
I'm pretty sure that next clip of TJ losing to Korextron 4 times in a row is in the upcoming Final Destination sequel. It's like all of a sudden all these terrible things are happening, like a truck's flipping over. Some people are like there's a giant sandstorm, and then TJ on ladder just losing 4 times in a row to the same guy.
But his opponent will be Nostam, who also, you know quite well, and he's one of the guys who've brought this fairly aggressive lineup overall, but the other guys haven't been performing too well. Do you think it's going to be a problem for Nostam in this matchup?
I don't know. They seem to be targeting Rogue. That's their goal. They thought a lot of players would bring Rogue, and Yoet's Flow, who brought the lineup, was actually just eliminated from the tournament. Chalky fell down to the losers bracket or lower bracket.
Admirable as well.
Admirable is in the lower bracket, yeah, but he's fighting back. He's won 3 of his last 4 matches, so. The lineup just, I don't know, it doesn't seem like it's working that well.
Yeah, we're about to find out. Yeah, we're about to find out if it's going to work for Nostam, but I'm going to leave you 2 guys to it, and I'll be back later.
Thank you very much, Raven. Now, TJ, we're finally alone.
Finally alone! For the first time in the whole preliminary, and the last time for the whole preliminary.
TJ and I have been working together for a while, so it's always it's always quite the treat. Treasure is also an appropriate word. We're going to start things off with Druid versus Rogue. Now, the Druid's very aggressive, and it tries to pressure the Rogue out of the game. However, one thing about this Beast Druid deck is the fact that I feel like it's a little bit too spell heavy as well. So you do tend to have like innervates and the swipes, and sometimes you just don't actually have plays. So it's kind of scary for Nostam. He's like, well, I probably want to keep Power of the Wild, but what if I don't get anything else after that?
Yeah, spell heavy without a draw engine is another big thing. So I can get inconsistent hands a lot, and the big thing about it is mulligans are crucial to the game plan. That's one of the hardest parts of the deck, because a lot of times the decisions are pretty straightforward. You know, there's usually not many too hard decisions. A lot of it comes down to the mulligan, and like you said, balancing whether or not you should keep these opening spells. And I'd say that's a pretty decent hand.
That is an amazing hand. I can't even begin to emphasize how fearsome it is for Druid to start with a Living Roots on turn 1, because it is just so inconvenient to remove it as a Rogue player. You don't want to coin the hero power because it kind of sabotages the rest of your hand, and yet that's 2 turns of these tree ants, or whatever they're called, trees.
Happy little trees?
Are they happy?
They look happy to me.
They look crazy at this point. Crazy little trees. They're doing 4 damage per turn, and you're not going to remove it. You're just going to have to coin SI, but you still gotten 6 damage at least with this. It's crazy.
Yeah.
That's very, very good.
Yeah. And Nostam, though, the next draw that he gets Ragnaros is actually the highest cost card in the deck by far. It tops out at 5, and then you have a big jump to Rag because, you know, it's just a great finisher. It's great in the meta right now. Deals well with Stealth Auctioneers, things like that.
Korextron having the SI7 agent, though, is the difference between whether or not you just take game-ending damage, though, versus stabilization. That coin becoming very useful.
Yeah. So Nostam's still looking for some pretty impactful cards here. Mark of Visage is one that's definitely great, combined with the 2/5. Oh man, what's the?
It's Druid of the Flame.
The Flame, yeah. But yeah, okay. I don't know why I forgot that name, but that's great combined with that.
Art.
Yeah, it does. And Violet Teacher combined with like an Innervate. We saw earlier Chalky actually won a game because he Violet Teachered, innervated that early, and then was able to get a big Power of the Wild. So there are some swing turns, but Korextron had a decent start despite Nostam having a strong one.
Yeah, that weapon charge is pretty powerful. Now, I wonder how Nostam chooses to address this SI agent. If you use the Wrath, you're kind of foregoing your ability to play minions. So he chooses to ignore it and instead get some damage in. I don't mind this at all. However, you know, if Korextron does have cards to deal with the Violet Teacher, you kind of lose a lot of the momentum that you're trying to generate too.
Yeah. Sap ends up becoming a big deal, and Tomb Pillager actually matches up quite nicely against a lot of the threats that this Beast Druid can throw out, especially, you know, that Druid of the Flame. Druid of the Saber is a decent pickup. It's sort of like guaranteed damage with the stealth, which is really important in this matchup. And you can see just how aggressive this deck is. You know, a lot of players look at the deck list and they think, well, how does this deck go aggressive? And it's basically just guaranteed damage is what it does.
Yeah, Salvador is still a very strong card. So Korextron, man, you're not really happy about it. I think you just probably end up sapping the Druid of the Flame and then playing Van Cleef. Do you want to trade the coin in just for that extra 2/2 on Van Cleef?
Yeah, well, Korextron says yes. The difference between a 6/6 and a 4/4 is actually pretty big. It doesn't get killed by Wrath plus Hero Power. It doesn't get killed by a swipe. It'll match up well against like a Druid of the Claw taunt form, or
Druid of the Flame replayed.
Or Druid of the Flame replayed, yeah.
It doesn't line up against 2 Wraths, which is a very good draw for our America's Winter finalist. What is Nostam going to do afterwards, though? He's just got Druid of the Flame, so he's going to have to hope for a little bit extra juice. Otherwise, he's going to be hoping for Ragnaros.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of cards in this deck that just deal direct damage. He's still got 2 swipes. He's got Living Roots, both Savage Roars, Mark of Visage, another Druid of the Saber. There's a lot that deal with it, but it's just going to be taken out by the Blood Mage Thalnos, plus the Phantom Knives.
Wow, well. Interesting choices for Nostam. I think he doesn't want to go for this 50-50 on Ragnaros hitting the right outcome. So instead he chooses just to keep the Innervate.
Yeah.
Korextron does have some plays next turn. He can draw a couple of cards. but he's going to need a little bit more than just what he has right now.
Is that a conceal that I see picked up? It is. So the concealed auctioneer. But the thing is, Nostam can actually set himself up in a situation next turn where he either wins or kills the auctioneer with the rag plus the innervate.
It's true, unless he picks up preparation into other cards to play, but I like this 50-50, actually. Yeah, very much so. Like, he just innervates out and puts him at 8.
Yeah.
And either outcome is good, but I think the option of killing him is the preferable one.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. And even if he kills the auctioneer, it would mean Korextron has to have like the ideal cards in order to just deal with the Ragnaros.
Oh, and there it is. Wow, Korextron pretty upset by that. He wasn't really expecting the innervate. I mean, he was thinking like, wow, what if he has Ragnaros? I'm still okay.
Yeah.
No, he's not okay. He's dead.
So despite having a decent start for Korextron, I mean, it wasn't the best, but he did have Coinus Eye. He did have, you know, the saps early on to get rid of some of these targets.
Yep.
The Beast Druid just puts on so much pressure, and that's where Rogue falters. They need setup turns in order to draw into more cards, draw into enough damage to win the game, and the Beast Druid just capitalizes on that so much.
And let's be real, too. I think the fact that the Ragnaros end the game was very flashy. It's like, oh, yes, you know, Ragnaros was able to finish another game. However, you recognize that even if Ragnaros hit the face and Rogue was left at 1 health, and say he didn't have the innervate, it's most likely Drew could finish the game from that point. Like, he just has the hero power, and there's no real taunts in that Rogue deck. So even though we did see the Rag and the innervate happen to be the right sequence of draws there, I think that Drew was in a really good position just to finish the game, no matter what happened after that point.
I was sort of keeping track of the evolution of this Druid deck from their practice group. Chalky actually recently won one of the Onog Opens with a lineup very similar to this one, but the Druid deck was different. That Ragnaros used to be a Starfire.
Oh, the 6-mana deal 5 damage draw card.
Deal 5 damage draw card.
Interesting.
And they eventually realized that maybe it's just better to put Ragnaros in. It's so strong right now. It makes the matchup better against Freeze Mage. It makes the matchup better against Rogue. The evolution of that deck over the course of however long they've been brewing it up is pretty cool to see. And now I think it's in a great spot to capitalize on certain lineups. But is the rest of this lineup from Korextron sort of in that pool of decks that this lineup capitalizes on?
It's interesting because you can see that Korextron just bringing very solid decks. He's got Freeze Mage. You saw that Rogue, the Miracle Rogue with Leroy. He's got Rena Warlock and Dragon Warrior. I mean, one of those decks was banned, but at the same time, he still has to win. And these decks are very, very aggressive. And for good, you can see it, like Tunnel Trog into any kind of overload or even Chargers to put pressure on. It's a lot of flexibility with how Nostam chooses to do this. I think if he really wants to maximize the most potential, he can even throw back the faces. But if he chooses to go for this overload route of just like Tunnel Trog, Coin, Feral Spirits, he'll have a pass on turn 3 and play the faces as well. Yeah.
And this is sort of the evolution of the meta right now. We saw players in Europe have similar success with a more aggressively themed lineup, like Devu, who actually had a Druid deck that was quite a bit different, but a similar idea where you sort of flood the board, you put a lot of pressure on early on. And he made it all the way to the decider match to make it to the top 8. So over the next couple weeks, I think that these more control-oriented decks are going to stop being as greedy as they are at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, this is why you just probably put the Doomsayer these days in your Rena Warlock. It's like specifically for stuff like this. It's not even the fact that the 1/3 is that threatening. It's what he can turn into. It's the potential. If I want to borrow a term that triggers TJ, it's the potential of the Tunnel Trog.
As long as you don't say wacky.
I won't.
Okay, good. I was hoping for it. Yeah, pretty good start here. No play for turn 3 here for Nostam. He was hoping for a 1-drop, or maybe he was hoping that Korextron was going to play a minion that he could have used the Lightning Bolt on. He is going to be going into turn 4 with Flame Wreath Faceless available to him.
And it does get conveniently answered by a big game hunter if Korextron had it in his hand. However, he doesn't. Instead, he's got Leroy Jenkins and finisher ways to help him finish the game. So a little bit awkward. Nostam going to avoid the possibility of having that blowout, instead dealing with the Spellbreaker to preserve his damage. I really like this play because a lot of people will be tempted. It's like, I have 2 Faceless. I want to get him out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you still preserve damage on the board. So by playing 5 damage on the board and saving 2, that's kind of like the same thing as playing the Faceless.
Yeah, you talked about Big Game Hunter, but another play that would have punished him would have been Power Overwhelming plus Shadow Flame. So, you know, removing your opponent's board and even though you're playing around fringe cases like a 2-card combo before your opponents even draw 10 cards in their deck, it's still the downside of making a play like that is almost none, where the upside is, you know, making sure that you actually have a board no matter what.
Rockbiter coming into the hand for Nostam. That gives him the Doomhammer and the Burst immediately off the bat, which is important because Korextron has that Acidic Swamp Ooze in hand, so if Nostam takes his sweet time on the next turns playing Doomhammer and saving that Rockbiter, he might be in trouble. Updates, by the way, Chestu did fall to Best Murloc NA, and Dear Jason has also defeated Fibonacci. Now, people will be looking at Fibonacci, a little bit sad to hear that, but Dear Jason is a person who actually got to the finals of the America's Championship back in 2014, if you can recall. So,
Super young guy, too. I think he was like 15 back then. He was the original boy wonder, original prodigy of Hearthstone.
Oh no! And all of a sudden, everyone just cared about Amnesiac and Chess Dude and
Dear
George
Jason
C.
just sitting there seething in the background.
I once was young. It's okay, man. You're entering the prime of your career. You're
Yeah.
17.
Yeah.
Not like us old folks here having to cast Hearthstone.
Yeah, forever.
Korextron choosing to play the Farseer. Can't really blame him, but I think he's just dead.
That's
The
it?
Rockbiter Doomhammer will wrap up this game. And Korextron just shaking his head and understanding that this is exactly what this lineup is trying to do.
Yeah.
Target the decks that are playing just a little bit too slowly. And Nostam finally putting himself in a position of potentially being the only person in this Paxtus group to continue to push or continue to win right now with this lineup.
Yeah, and you know, I saw a tweet from Chalky right before this match started that said he 3-0'd somebody's rogue. You know, so this is the exact lineup that Nostam's lineup is sort of built to counter, and you know, Freeze Mage is going to be sort of the one deck that we haven't seen this aggressive style go up against. But aggressive decks, hyper aggressive decks, have traditionally been pretty good against Freeze Mage because you don't give them time to draw into stall spells or, you know, both secrets, things like that.
Yeah. However, I think Zoo lacking reliable ways to end the game that quickly. Like, you do have Power Overwhelming, but you still need the board, unless they're playing Leroy Jenkins in the deck. And then you also lose tools like Lotheb. Owl got nerfed, so you have to play Crazed Alchemist, which is just a little bit more awkward on how things go. It just overall feels like Zoo is much, much weaker against Freeze Mage overall.
Yeah, I definitely say so. We even saw things like Crazed Alchemist being put in for Doomsayers, especially now that so many decks are running Doomsayers. You talked about Reno Jackson. We're seeing it in Mid-Range Hunter, which if you told me that 6 months ago, I would have slapped you right in the face.
And I would have slapped you back, an eye for an eye.
Fair enough.
I believe in equality, TJ.
It's a good thing to believe in. Well, we are going to jump into this next match here. Nostam, one game away from moving on further into the upper bracket.
So with this start, even keeping Voidwalker is like okay, even though it's a very passive thing. You just need to get damage and pressure onto the board here. Korextron has pretty much everything he wants. He's got early game card draw. He's got Doomsayer for when the board, you know, expands too fast. So I feel like things are really good right now for Korextron, even though Nostam is curving out. The Zoo will continue to always use their mana very efficiently. It's just, that's what Life Tap does. That's what their early game minions do.
Yeah, and with cards, the new cards in the set like Forbidden Ritual, that just sort of, I mean, it fits your curve for you. It makes those awkward turns in sort of that mid-game where you can't use all your mana. It makes those turns much more smooth. So, but Nostam's in trouble. Even though he's had a good start, that's only 3 power on the board. That's not very much.
All right, so this is the point where I would probably pause the game and wait for Laughing to message me what to do, because there's a lot of lines of play here, especially with the coin here on Korextron. He can go for a type of card draw. Like, how good is it to use Loot Hoarder in that situation? Because Novice Engineer guarantees you a draw later on, which you might need.
Yeah.
Versus, would you want to use the Acolyte to get multiple card draws, or would you want to play Doomsayer here or save it for the Frost Nova? This is exactly the position in which a lot of Freeze Mages disagree on and ends up becoming a big controversial point.
Yeah.
Because now he lost his Doomsayer. So the moment he picks up Frost Nova, that card becomes infinitely weaker.
Yeah. Korextron actually looked pretty perplexed as to why Nostam decided to use the power overwhelming there. It looked like he didn't think that was a trade that was worth it for Nostam. But, at the end of the day, that's, 2 Voidwalkers that he gets to keep on the board, and he still preserves that 1/1. It does reduce his maximum potential burst at the end of the game, but a lot of times that's not as consequential as keeping this damage on the board to get continual face damage as the game goes on.
Korextron's still going to draw cards anyways with that Acolyte, so Nostam doesn't want to give him the health and the cards, just rather give him a little bit of pressure here. Korextron picks up Emperor Thorson, not exactly the card that he wants right now, but might be useful later. Chooses to play Ice Barrier. What do you think about that, TJ?
I think that, I mean, a lot of times you can't really fit in Ice Barrier in later turns. There's going to be more crucial turns with a lot more power being represented on the board in the next 2 or 3 turns where he'll have to have a certain play, whether it be Frost Nova, Blizzard, something like that. So getting it out while you can, I think is definitely a smart choice.
What I do want to do, though, if I'm the Freeze Mage players, I want to be able to draw more cards. So I wasn't even against playing Arcane Intellect.
Yeah.
To dig deeper, because you do have Flame Strike. You need to get like the Frost Nova into the Flame Strike. That would be one way you can benefit off of that card still.
Yeah. The other reason I was thinking is maybe he just wants to be able to safely coin into Emperor Thorsan. But the thing is, if he had played Arcane Intellect the turn prior, he'd be getting more discounts on Emperor Thorsan. So if that was his intentions in the last turn, then Arcane Intellect, I think, would have even been a better play.
How much damage can Nostam do?
714. Actually, maximum 15. If you Forbidden Ritual at the end, you get the added buff to the Dark Shadow Council.
Sir Finley Murgleton.
Oh, man.
I mean, the Flame Imp is the most aggressive card, but sometimes Sir Finley ends up becoming a game changer as well. Hunter Hero Power is insanely good if you're able to get that. However, the Discover doesn't always give you that choice, and then sometimes you're stuck with, like, Rogue Hero Power, and you're like, oh, man, this is the only thing I can do.
So Nostam really wants to answer this Emperor Thorsan, and he had a couple ways to do it. One would be to use the Crazed Alchemist to swap the stats of the Dark Shadow Councilman, but he really values that minion, and he also probably values that Crazed Alchemist to deal with the Doomsayer if a Frost Nova Doomsayer were to come out.
Yeah, definitely. And Dark Shadow Councilman still can't get killed by Flame Strike. Korextron would have to need something else. So if he's committed to playing Flame Strike, he's also committed to taking more damage with the Dark Shadow Councilman. So this is one of those awkward situations where you had the chance to draw cards, and now do you want to spend more time drawing cards and just hope that these 1/1s don't kill you?
Yeah, very true. And now he is going to have to spend that mana. He really wants to find a Frost Nova. He does find an Ice Block, which I guess at some point would be a necessity. But at the moment, it doesn't help him for the current state of the board.
Korextron going to dig a little deeper. Blizzard a little bit too late. But if he can Frost Bolt and survive this turn, Blizzard is excellent on the following turn. You have to Frost Bolt to stall just for a little bit longer. The follow-up is what's debatable, if you want to play Loot Hoarder into Thanos, or if you want to play Arcane Intellect number 2.
Yeah. And he's just going to load up the board with Cycle, and at the moment, that 20 health from Korextron feels exceptionally far away from Nostam's reach, with just Leroy and already one natural power overwhelming from his deck used. So it's going to be tough for him to get there.
Is there any world where you played Crazed Alchemist on the Dark Shadow Councilman?
I was
Did
actually...
they flip it as like a 2/8 so it just doesn't ever die?
Yeah, I was actually thinking that, because then it's still going to continue to get its buff. I mean, you're going to keep it alive, but the one thing is, you do get completely blown out of the game by Doomsayer at this stage. So it's kind of that card that you have to sort of keep in your back pocket for the moment.
He did use one Doomsayer, though, TJ.
He did, to be fair, but I mean, since then he's drawn like 15 cards.
Nostam has the possibility of dealing 9 damage to his own face this turn, and hence another reason why it's maybe he's thinking about Sir Finley and wishing he had the choice again, but of course he didn't know he'd be drawing into all of his Flame Imps.
Yeah,
can't really blame him on that one.
Yeah, and right now Korextron can actually pretty safely just set up for. Oh no, he doesn't have nearly enough mana. I was going to say you could try and set up for just a 2-turn lethal by developing Ice Block and throwing Burn, but he doesn't have enough mana to do that. He need 9 mana to Ice Block and double.
Yeah, but I don't think there's any rush still. Like
Yeah.
Blizzard does exactly what he wants anyways.
Yeah.
I am still okay with using Arcane Intellect. He chooses to Hero Power because he wants to remove every single minion possible, so that way he feels comfortable playing the other cards in his hand. But I mean, Nostam is definitely very far away from threatening his opponent.
Yeah. Abusive Strategy gets him slightly closer, but
So
still.
awkward.
He's going to go down to 14 and realizes that this is sort of a desperation move. He's going to have to use the Crazed Alchemist to do nothing to the Knife Juggler, except provoke him to throw another knife, which he would have done anyway.
Yeah. Knife Juggler, getting that 1 extra damage might be relevant. At least he's not thirsty anymore. Forgotten Torch, gonna just go straight to the face and in for a Pirate Blast. And despite all the hiccups early on, that Nostam was like throwing Korextron's way, Korextron still has that Pirate Blast. So that's gonna wrap up the game here. Like, there's no way for Nostam to guarantee any kind of lethal kill, so he's just gonna toss in everything he has.
Yeah. So Korextron did manage to get there. Despite that early Doomsayer being dealt with and not drawing into a single Frost Nova until just now. He's still able to come up with a win. Sort of classically been the strength of Freeze Mage in this matchup. It just stalls the board. Such a board-centric deck in the Zoo Warlock.
All right, so Korextron showing some life here, but can his Rogue and his Reno Lock take down the Zoo? The Rogue can definitely do it. The Reno Warlock, though, jury's still out on that one. We're not sure whether or not it's able to continue to make that comeback or not.
Yeah, and you know, this is the deck that I would have guessed to be the weak link if I was judging by the lineups right off the bat.
Sure.
Just because a lot of times people don't really lump Zoo in as an aggro deck. It's a pressure deck, it's a board control deck, but not an aggro deck. There have been some tech inclusions now that players have been including. Just like the Soulfire, it's a great card as a finisher. It's also, there's so many crucial 4-health minions out there right now to have to deal with.
All right, so we're going into game number 4 in just a second here. Korextron with that Reno Warlock is probably going to put that on a nice, so that way he can bring out the Rogue. The Rogue specifically against the Warlock still actually doesn't, like the matchups for Zoo is still very much in flux. I think a lot of people feel like, like Rogue has Fan of Knives, so it should be good against cards like Forbidden Ritual. However, Warlock is still good at pressuring Rogue, and I think one of the most important things is like Warlock starting on turn 2 and like coining out 2 1-drop minions and taking away Rogue's ability to use the coin really effectively. So I think like stuff like that will really start tilting the matchups in Zoo's favor.
Yeah, also something that Bob mentioned earlier in the broadcast, and that people have just been mentioning in general. Blade Flurry is effectively gone, and a lot of
not TJ. Blade Flurry is still there.
It's effectively
watching
gone.
over you.
It is. Oh God,
Blade Flurry
it's in the building.
Blade Flurry is everywhere.
Yeah,
we are all Blade Flurry.
Wise words. Amen to that.
Namaste.
I even lost where I was going with that. Something Blade Flurry Zoo Warlock. There you go. That's my point.
Flurry was one of the ways that Rogue was very much favored against Zoo, if you were to interpret it that way. However, Zoo having aggressive cards like Leroy, having a good curve with the coin, having ways to protect Knife Juggler. Yeah, that's Jugglist. You don't want to just assume every juggler is the same. What are you talking about, Frodan?
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at the cards and how they match up in a vacuum. Yeah. They say, wow, Backstab does so well against Knife Juggler. Wow, SI7 Agent does so well against Flame Imp and Knife Juggler. But how do you deal with double Voidwalker? How do you deal with a Dark Shadow Councilman unless you have Shadow Strike? But Korextron is just sort of anti-proving all my points.
Protects me.
It's true. This is why I do like Nostam's play, because if his opponent wasn't able to backstab it, then Knife Juggler would have gotten 2 extra damage out.
Yeah.
And yes, you do miss the 3-attack minion, the 3-attack base on the Knife Juggler, but it's still a lot of damage to push out.
Yeah. And Dark Shadow Councilman will meet a relatively swift end, it appears, with the Shadow Strike. Korextron might... No, you can't leave that up. He might feel inclined to play on curve and play Zero Poison Mine, but just seems suboptimal.
Yeah, Zero Poison Mind is one of the stronger cards that Rogue got in the expansion. The Toxins are particularly very useful, as Korextron is trying to stabilize. This juggle is a big difference maker, and it does land onto the Farseer. And now you have to use Zero Poison Mind, hopefully getting the Fire Bloom Toxin, which allows you to do damage.
Yeah.
Oh no, instead he got Blood Thistle. Okay, so that one is very good with an SI7 agent, is very good with cards that can help you control the state of the board, but with Zero, it's not very useful. I think Korextron's debating if he wants to use Conceal here.
Yeah, a lot of times you don't necessarily need Conceal against Zoo. A lot of times what you do is you win just by gaining control of the board at a reasonable health total. And then from that point on, the Zoo Warlock will just never get back in the game. You don't necessarily need to wait until you have a huge combo in order to win, so... Ooh.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to train the Knife Juggler at this point, but if you train the Voidwalker, you're missing some damage. We're not missing some. You've done 4 damage into Zero, which gives it a lot of value. Yeah. Is he trading in the Juggler? There he is. Another Blood Thistle Tox. That's like the worst one. Because he had no minions.
He can remove the whole board with one SI7 agent. He's going to overwork it.
Oh, you're right. Well, I mean, you would probably sap still.
Thank you. Oh, for sure, yeah. I'm saying it in later stages of the game. But Nostam does have a lot of burst in the hand, but he's lost all semblance of control over the board. Ooh, that's a pickup.
That is insane. The Nostam draws the Direwolf Alpha, perfect buff, perfect mana usage, and ends up trading into the Tomb Pillager. Once again, putting Korextron on no minions to play. The dream!
One SI7 agent clears the board. Here we go.
The name's 7. SI7. Are you kidding me? He get on a... This guy is crazy.
He's going to go on a rampage right now.
He needed precisely those 5 cards to clear the board.
This guy's toast.
That's awesome. And you know what's fun, too, is that now you can start controlling the state of the board with the SI, and you can cold-blood it.
This guy's
Nostam even gives a slight little smile seeing that. He knows that even though his board is clean and he's probably in a pretty bad spot.
Would you like some butter with all that bread? All that toast and no board to show for it. Nostam tries to climb back with a Flame Imp, but with double fan into a Cold Blood. I mean, Korextron's about to turn this game upside down.
Yeah.
He saves 1 fan for the Forbidden Ritual in case that comes out.
Yeah, and I like pushing damage with the Cold Blood here. Conceal is just sort of the cherry on top. Usually the only way that they'll have to deal with that SI7 agent would be a Soulfire, but Korextron knows that Nostam's actually been holding on to 2 cards in his hand since about turn 3, which is when both those Power Overwhelmings were drawn. So he knows, and now Nostam's in a lot of trouble because if this SI7 agent hits face once more, it really limits his ability to life tap throughout the rest of this game.
He also used the Crazed Alchemist on the Imp Gang boss, which conveniently lines up. This game got out of control, and you have one person to thank. SI7 agent. Dun, 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 dun. I don't understand how that actually turned around just from that one card. Everyone always talks about Gadget and Auctioneer as being the main engine draw for that. And like, well, yeah, he can still win if he draws Auctioneer. It's like, well, he has 1 more turn to draw Auctioneer. And ends up being like, well, SI7 agent was actually the chosen one.
Yeah, the thing is, I've actually seen that before. That's why it played back in my head, because that's something that you don't really forget, especially when someone does it against you. So I was like, oh, man. Double Blood Thistle. This is over. But yeah, that means that we're going to a game number 5. So it's going to be Warlock versus Warlock. Arena Warlock versus the Zoo now. That might be a little bit of a liability for Nostam. He's struggling to find a win with it.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, this is a matchup that he finally feels like he has the edge in. I definitely feel like because Reno Lock has lost a step or 2 of its athleticism. You know, it's not really as explosive as it used to be.
Never really recovered from that torn ACL.
They never do. Tommy John surgery, or TJ surgery for short. Nostam still is going to be able to curve out. Cards like Soulfire is also what really puts it over the top. Kind of surprised Nostam hasn't drawn some of his more aggressive options. By the way, that is something that won't happen every game either. Nostam had double power overwhelming and not a lot of minions to play.
Yeah.
That's something that ultimately sabotaged him as well.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's not the cards that Korextron's looking.
That's a poor curve, to say the least. He does have Doomsayer, though. That can that really helps buy you some time. It effectively buys you 2 turns. Because the turn that you play it, and of course, the turn that your opponent passes. So it's one of the reasons why it's been such a strong tech inclusion. And Korextron is gonna think for a bit, but it's kind of risky.
He's very greedy.
Whoa.
I mean, the thing about it is, again, you're not trying to answer just the abusive sergeant. You're trying to stop your opponent from playing a minion.
Yeah.
And now, if your opponent has a single crazed alchemist, cards like Doomsayer just become very bad. You don't get life tap. You don't get the board tempo.
Yeah, but this is a tough situation for Nostam now, because if he doesn't pick up some way to deal with this this Doomsayer, then he might end up throwing Dark Peddler away. So it's risky. He either needs Power Overwhelming or he needs Abusive Sergeant.
Or Soulfire.
Or Soulfire. But he might risk throwing away Leroy Jenkins.
So he
picks it up. Okay.
And that's what Dark Peddler does. Definitely buying.
Yeah.
This is a buyer's market for Nostam. He's going to be able to trade into that Doomsayer and Korextron. That's not what he wanted to see.
Yeah, and especially since that was picked up from a Dark Peddler, you're effectively just trading the Abusive Sergeant in for that Doomsayer at the end of the day, and missing a couple damage from the attack from the Councilman. But still, now this might open up a window for Nostam to maybe snowball this game just a little bit.
Yeah, Imp-Gang Boss and Possessed Villager is not enough for a clean trade, but I don't even know if you really want a clean trade anyways, because you want to rush your opponent down. Shadow Flame, a little bit off from guaranteeing clearing the board. There's just a couple of minions that survive here, so I guess you just use Faceless or you Shadow Bolt. Which one looks more appetizing to you, TJ?
I think, well, I was going to say Faceless, but then he tapped, so now I'm going to flip-flop and say Shadow Bolt. Faceless...
That's why you're a good guest.
Yeah, just flip-flop at a moment's notice.
That's what I do all the time. I'm like, well, he could be thinking about this, but he's also considering this.
Yeah,
I like it.
It takes reaction speed. You got to see what they're going to mouse over, and then
teach me your ways,
immediately switch your opinion over to what your opponent did. But then you also have to make sure that you're ready to flip-flop back when they get punished.
Okay, that's what I do
for
wrong
making a play that's wrong. Yeah. Don't worry. I'm here. I'm here to cover for you, Dan. Don't worry.
Please. You can do the next fact segment too, the trivia section.
Thank you.
Korextron has a lot of cards he could play, but which one is the one that effectively helps him the most? Hellfire damages himself. He doesn't have a target for Shadow Flame. He hasn't had enough turns for Nerubian Prophet to be a valuable selection either. There's 9 damage on board with 2 damage per minion played for the Knife Juggler. Oh no, that's pretty much the game.
That is game.
Nostam has Soulfire and Leroy Jenkins going to put him up 3-2 and take this series. And even though it looked like it was bad news for him, even though the series was tied up, Nostam is going to go to the next round.
Yeah, and Korextron is not pleased about that outcome, but Nostam probably breathes a sigh of relief because that series came down to the wire.
Yeah.
And just stress coming out from Nostam. I know he gets incredibly stressed. If you remember back to the winter preliminary last season, he had lots of face palms throughout the entire day.
Yeah, so. Nostam actually didn't directly go into the top 8 last season. The reason why he actually went to the event was because one player had to drop out, so he was the next highest player based off of the placings. He was 9th. So, he's definitely gone through some ups and downs, but plenty of more ups to hopefully to be had for him because I think he played that series very well, all things considering.
Yeah, that was a kind of crazy set as well. I thought it was going to go very quickly, one of the faster sets of the day, but fair play to Korextron. He did really well overall to try and claw it back there. Just missed out at the just at the last hurdle there. Do you think there were any lineup defining issues in that?
No, I mean, if you look at Korextron's lineup on paper, that's one of the stronger lineups. That's what we saw a lot of players have success with. If we look back to the Europe preliminary last week, I don't know if he was really expecting a lot of players to switch gears so quickly after that meta that we saw last week into a more aggressive stance. So I don't think you can really blame Korextron for being this lineup. I think his lineup is still really strong. It just Nostam's had a little bit of an edge.
Yeah, I actually was kind of feeling the momentum going to Korextron's side. When you see plays like that SI7 agent single-handedly bring him back into the game, clearing the board and getting the cold blood, there's like this weird tangible momentum shift that both players feel like. One guy just feels like he's immortal, and the other guy feels like, oh my god, this is where I lose. I was like up 2-0, and then all of a sudden he ties it up and going into game number 3. Usually that's how it completely turns on its head, but thankfully Nostam was able to stabilize here and not let that ruin him. Sometimes you just can't emotionally recover from it and it clouds your judgment.
Not something like that anyway. Yeah. But we are pretty much halfway through the day now, and we do actually have just a bit of a video just to show you what's gone on throughout the day so far.
Yeah, so this starts off with the first series, Fibonacci versus Tides of Time, highlighted by Tides of Time's very wacky Shaman deck. However, he did have this weird thing where he didn't play his own Yogg-Saron when the
it felt like there was a definite mistrust of Yogg in some of those games there.
Yeah, and then we moved on to Chalky versus PNC, and this was sort of a showcase. A showcase of
not pirates.
Not only Chalky's showmanship, but also some of the weaknesses that this lineup possessed, and of course Amnesiac versus Impact.
My favorite series of the day so far, because I think we had some really good plays back and forth. I love Amnesiac's creative problem solving. I really like some of the decks that Impact brought, but in the end, looks like Amnesiac was just able to edge him out.
Yeah, and this is the set we just saw. What we thought was going to be a bit of a steamroll for the first couple of games, but then got a little bit close there for Nostam.
Yeah, and it did go down to all 5 games of the set, but at the end of the day, Nostam was the one to take it and move on to the upper bracket round of 32. So he's one step closer to securing a spot at a second consecutive top 8 or top 9.
Yep,
I guess.
there it is.
Yep. So those were the plays we've seen on stream, but to give you a bit more of an update on what's going on off stream, is Sottle.
Thank you, Raven. I am joined by 2 of the most interesting personalities you'd ever care to meet in Hearthstone. We're going to have a little Q&A section in a minute, but as Raven mentioned, we do have some updates to give you, and the death march for the players on the board has begun. Savitz, I think you're going to do the honors since we're starting off on your side of the board. All right. The first player to drop is Tides of Time, who has gone out in the lower bracket. So despite, I think, everyone being a fan of at least that Shaman deck that he brought, we all wanted to see a bunch more of it, right? But
definitely.
That's not going to be the case. Tides of Time, who was Frodan's second pick, is the first player eliminated. And moving on again on your side, Savitz. TJ's pick, the pick that was criticized by Frodan, turns out to be quite rightly, is Yoi's Flow has been eliminated as well.
That elimination does put some of his teammates at risk as well, considering they were running similar deck list. In fact, I think the same deck list.
I think many of them do have exactly the same, yeah. So we have one more to give you, and it is a very, very big name. There was a Battle of the Giants in the lower bracket as Savitz's pick, Dog, took on Kibler's pick in Chucky, and Dog was able to take that one, which means that Chucky has now been eliminated.
Were Chucky and Yoi's Flow, they were running the same lineup, right?
Right, yes they were.
So it hasn't been working so well so far.
So Chucky is name number 3 to bite the dust, but still, plenty of names still left in. It's worth noting that now Dog, after taking care of Chucky, now gets to play Kibler's other pick of Zalay. So Dog could single-handedly end up crushing Kibler's dreams in this tournament.
Yeah, Dog, I'm sorry, Brian, but that's just the way it's going to go this week. And Dog is going to take out both of Kibler's picks. And
the look of superiority on Savitz's face right now.
I'm kind of happy about the first one, and I think Dog is going to also take out Zalay.
Awesome. So yeah, we are going to have a little Q&A session from here. I'm going to fire the first question at Bob. I'm going to ask you, who has the best, most innovative, or most interesting lineup in this tournament?
Well, the reason I picked WTY Bill was his interesting lineup. He's got the Murloc Paladin, the Freeze Mage, the Miracle Rogue, and the traditional hand lock, not even Arena lock. So that style of play where you're just kind of controlling your opponent's board, trying to stop them from doing literally anything you can, and then smack your opponent in the face for big damage. I think with as many decks as you can play with that, hey, that's a lot of fun. So my pick represents that question.
All right, interactivity is not high on the list of things that he favors. He's playing solitaire for a lot of his games, it looks like. Savit's going to fire this one at you, Bob. I don't want to sell your tournament experience short, but Savit's, before you officially retired and became a full-time Hearthstone person, that's it. You were a very experienced tournament player yourself. So my question to you is, how do you prepare for a huge tournament of this size, and specifically, what effect does revealed deck lists have on your preparation?
Well, we might be the ones picking players here for predictions, but what the players are doing, they are picking their classes, and they don't just pick whatever they think are like the strongest classes for ladder. It's different when you play in tournaments. So one of the key things is definitely to kind of like try to predict the meta. What the other players bringing? Like for example, if we ever see like Yoich's Flow and Chucky, I think that their lineup might have been targeted as Rogue, and maybe there isn't enough Rogue. That's just an example. Rogue is actually one of the most popular classes, but it could be like a thing that that might like make you or break you if you predict it wrong. Like if you think a lot of Hunter is going to be there and there's no Hunter, you might be in bad shape.
So there's two ways to go, right? You can just try and bring the generally strong stuff, in which case you'll have a fairly middle-of-the-road performance against everything, or you can really try and make that hard meta read, right? Which is high risk, high reward. If it works, if you got the meta right, then you'll crush everything, but if you whiff on it, you can be in trouble. So definitely think that's a big consideration. Bob, starting with you on this one, what are the differences between what we've seen in the Americas prelims from what we saw in Europe, and what reasons do you think you can give for those differences?
Well, it looks like we're seeing a lot more aggressive decks on the warrior side of things. Right. Before we were seeing these kind of mid-rangey kind of decks. Now we're seeing pirates. And, well, unfortunately, maybe that's not the best choice.
Yeah, it's not working out too well so far.
Our two Yarmatey pirates here have had their ships sunk early on. So ultimately, I think that might be it. There's a lot more tech choices as well. There's a wider variety of zoo tech choices now than that were in the Europe lineups. I think there was this kind of agreed upon deck list in zoo before, and now it's kind of gone everywhere. People aren't sure what works the best.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, that is enough generic analyst talk. It's time for you both to put your neck on the line with hard data by the end of this tournament, which is going to be the best performing deck. Starting with Savitz.
That's a tough one, but I'm going to say it's going to be Shaman. Mid-range Shaman. I think Shaman just overall, it has been very solid. A lot of players played on ladder, but there's a reason to it. I think it's extremely powerful. There's a lot of different variations, and I believe mid-range version might be the strongest. I think Shaman is going to go far.
Okay, Bob, same question?
Well, at the risk of sounding like I'm just kind of copying Mr. Savitz here, I'm going to go with mid-range Shaman as well. It has proven to be beating out all of the more aggressive decks, which have been more popular in the NA region. So as a result, it's pretty much just picking up a lot of free wins. I wish I could pick Reno Mage. I wish I could pick Reno Rogue
sounds
at all.
exciting.
There is one of them, I think, in this tournament. But ultimately, those Renos seem to be getting crushed quite badly in these first matches we've watched.
All right, so fairly standard picks, but both of these guys have their reputations at stake here. So they could have pushed the boat out, gone for the Control Shaman from Tides or the Pirate decks, but we can see how well that's working out. So no surprise, the more consistent decks are getting the vote. But we are going to go to a very, very short break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back with lots more Hearthstone action.